Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Superman? They're related more closely than you might expect. The most well-known names in comic book creation, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, Simon and Schuster, are all Jewish, and their ethno-religious cultural heritage had a habit of seeping into their stories, characters, and dialogue.
No one has had a greater influence on comic books than Jews. Superman, Iron Man, Batman, Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, they were all created with Jewish influences and values in mind.
Why did Jews create superheroes? The answer is sad, succinct, and simple. The late 1930s were arguably the most anti-Semitic period in American history. Many Ivy League schools kept a quota on the number of Jews allowed. Country clubs and even some neighborhoods barred Jews altogether. Comic books were in their infancy. They were the lowest rung on the artistic food chain. There was no barriers to entry. Through the prism of Jewish storytelling and the immigrant experience, comic book creators infused their creations with a particularly Jewish worldview. Here you see young immigrant Jews tapping into a storytelling tradition rich in biblical archetypes. After all, writers write about what they know about.
From comics to movies to cartoons to toys and lunchboxes, superheroes have evolved with the times and the consumer since the 1930s. Starting in 2000, the new frontier for the superhero genre has been the creation of major multi-part superhero movie universes. The most prevalent in popular culture is perhaps the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the DC Extended Universe and the X-Men series have also carved out their place in the market.
Superheroes are more mainstream now than ever, but the general public remains unaware of how Judaism and Jews influence so many of their favorite stories and characters. Allegories to Jewish history and the Torah have been ignored and erased in the comic book movie adaptations of the last 15 years, as have Jewish characters themselves. For all the influence they once had, the current state of the superhero genre begs the question, where are the Jews? Take, for example, Superman as played by Henry Cavill in the DC Extended Universe. Created by Joe Simon and Jerry Schuster, both of whom grew up in the poor immigrant Jewish neighborhoods of New York City in the 1930s, Superman represented clear Jewish and biblical imagery, starting in Superman #1.
His Kryptonian name was Kal-El, Kal-El, which to any of your listeners who speak Hebrew, they understand that the rough translation is a vessel of God. And so we have this character coming down, being put out in space by his parents to try to save him, and being rescued by two Gentiles in the middle of the Midwest somewhere in America named Martha and John Kent. And if that's not the story of Exodus and Moses, then I've never seen that story told well.
But this new Superman, who made his debut in 2013's Man of Steel, lacks the same symbolism that has been a part of Superman for 80 years. The film chose to rewrite Superman's origin story, making him the first naturally conceived child of Krypton in generations. It is intended to resemble an immaculate birth. Later, following a self-sacrifice in the final battle, director Zack Snyder has Superman return in a rather familiar pose to make sure no one in the audience misses the parallel. Snyder is quoted as claiming the Christ analog was the tried and true Superman metaphor, but the source material in the comic books simply doesn't support his argument.
It's about as difficult to find Christ-like parallels in Superman comics as to find Superman's abandoned Jewish influence in Man of Steel. Now, the X-Men series does at least include canonically Jewish characters.
Magneto, real name Eric Lehnsherr, is known to readers as the ultimate antihero, both enemy and ally of Professor X and the X-Men, depending on the fight. The X-Men are all mutants, deriving their powers from their own mutated X gene, and Magneto lives by a philosophy that he has to attack humans, or they will destroy the mutants, his people, the same way they destroyed the Jews, also his people, during the Holocaust. Classic X-Men number 19 established Magneto as an Auschwitz survivor. As a teenager, he was put to work in Auschwitz-Birkenau as a Sonderkommando. These were Jewish prisoners responsible for preparing other Jews for the gas chamber, bringing their bodies to the ovens, and disposing of their ashes.
When, after 15-20 minutes, they open up the thing, the first thing I saw the people I saw 15 minutes before alive, I saw the mothers with the children. I said to myself, how can I do it? And I said to myself, the only thing I can do, that's why I don't remember a lot of things. I said to myself, I am a robot. And I did just this to my mind. And I said, from now on, close your eyes and do whatever is to be done without asking too much.
Traumatized by watching the genocide of his people at a young age, he embodies the mantra of the Holocaust Remembrance Movement: never again.
X-Men First Class opens on young Erich Lenscher at Auschwitz, but he's not a Sonderkommando. He stands in Dr. Klaus Schmidt's office as Schmidt tries to force him to show off his power of metal control by threatening Erich's mother's life. Cut to 18 years later in 1962, and the successful and deadly Nazi-hunting Erich Lenscher of the comics is gone, replaced by the Erich Lenscher focused on hunting only Schmidt, the man who killed his mother.
The loss of his mother is devastating, but Magneto's entire philosophy as a character is based on the genocide of the Jews and his fear of the genocide of the mutants. The Jewish experience informs his entire worldview, which is why its disappearance from the X-Men series leaves Magneto with no real reason behind his hatred of humans. His argument falls flat. By taking away his origins as a Holocaust survivor, the X-Men series turns a complicated, morally ambiguous anti-hero into a revenge-crazed villain.
When you're talking about Jewish superheroes with origins in the Holocaust, Wanda and Pietro Maximoff, who were introduced to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in 2015's Avengers: Age of Ultron, are bound to come up. In the Marvel Comics canon, the Maximoffs are the children of two Holocaust survivors, Magda, a Romani woman, and Erich Lenscher. As the half-Jewish, half-Romani children of Holocaust survivors, their identities are tied to the persecution and genocide of their people by the Nazis.
The major in-world villain of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the decades-old organization Hydra, which is first introduced as a Nazi group participating in experimental medical science with some world domination on the side. Captain America: The First Avenger, Captain America: The Winter Soldier, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and Avengers: Age of Ultron all establish Hydra as the malevolent force of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and as an objectively Nazi organization. So it came as a shock when Marvel fans learned of the new origin story that screenwriter and director Joss Whedon had written for Wanda and Pietro. In the opening battle of the movie, the twins are captured from a Hydra base by the Avengers, and Wanda explains that they volunteered to be experimented on by Hydra because of their hatred for America, after an American-made missile orphaned them at a young age. Their powers come from this Hydra experimentation.
It is well known that Nazi scientists often used camp prisoners for unethical medical experimentation, but Whedon still decided to take these half-Jewish, half-Romani people with family ties to the Holocaust and have them deliberately put themselves in the same situation. Again, Hydra is an established Nazi organization.
Wanda and Pietro are unceremoniously ripped from their identity, their history, and their culture. No mentions of Judaism, Romani people, or the Holocaust are included, save the Maximoff's home country of Sokovia, a fictional, vaguely Eastern European country. At best, Sokovia is, for hopeful fans, the slightest opportunity to pray that the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Maximoffs are still Ashkenazi Jews or Romani people.
At some point, the hopes and dreams of those who admire Jewish superheroes and crave non-stereotypical representation in the media just become wishful thinking. It happens over and over again. Superman, Magneto, and the Maximoff twins are not the only Jewish superheroes to have their identity passively dismissed or aggressively taken away, and they won't be the last.
Innovation is one thing, but superhero movies have completely neglected to treat Jewish influence and Jewish characters with the same respect they received from their original Jewish creators, Gaines, Lee, Kirby, Siegel, Simon, and Schuster.
The fact of the matter is, you can't take Judaism out of comics or remove superheroes from Judaism. But for all the time, energy, and passion Jews have put into comics in the last 80 years, few of the self-proclaimed superfans running production, direction, and screenwriting for this new wave of superhero franchises, Snyder and Whedon being at the top of the list, few seem to remember, respect, or have any interest in paying tribute to those who built the foundations for their work.